Long before evil came into existence, before the first human set foot on earth, infinite goodness reigned in the heavens. Everything was perfect. Every angel radiated immense light and felt deep reverence for their Father, the Creator of all. But among all the angels, one stood out above the others, Lucifer. Lucifer, the morning star, was the seal of perfection. Full of wisdom and perfect in beauty, he was the first creation that God sculpted with his mighty hand. A masterpiece, one that was admired by all of heaven. Lucifer wasn't just any angel. He was the most intelligent, the most powerful, and the most honorable being in all of creation. God delighted in making Lucifer, his masterpiece, and granted him power like no other angel. Lucifer possessed the greatest intelligence, second only to God himself. He was flawless in every way, admired by all. But not everything could be perfect. In a hidden moment, wickedness was found in Lucifer, and that moment marked the beginning of the end for the once perfect angel. Lucifer became the source of all evil and suffering in the world. He became the prince of darkness, the corrupter of souls, the lord of destruction, Satan. His fall left a deep scar in heaven, and though light returned, it would never be the same again. Like a broken mirror, paradise would forever remember the betrayal. Lucifer's story is a warning that even the brightest star can fall into darkness. The perfect heavens before the fall. Before tragedy struck, heaven was a realm of perfect order. Every angel had a mission to fulfill, serving the Creator with unwavering devotion. At the highest level were the seraphim, like living flames burning with love and purity. They sang without rest, their voices echoing in eternal praise. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. Next came the cherubim, guardians of divine wisdom and protectors of the universe's deepest secrets. They repelled any shadow of impurity, ensuring heaven remained flawless. The archangels and angels were closer to humanity, standing as warriors, messengers, and guardians of souls, ensuring evil would not come near. In this perfect order, God created Lucifer, the morning star, as a being of unmatched beauty and wisdom. Lucifer wasn't just admired for his appearance. He was a leader, a beacon to the other angels. His charisma was magnetic, and his presence commanded respect. Even the seraphim and cherubim listened intently to his wisdom, and even Michael, the greatest warrior, admired him. Lucifer organized the heavenly choirs, directing praises to the Creator with fervor and passion. His voice was like a flame in the darkness, a radiance that guided the angels in their songs and prayers. But despite all this perfection, something changed. Lucifer, blinded by his own brilliance, allowed pride to take root in his heart. His desire for glory consumed him, like a hidden fire that slowly destroyed him. The Bible tells us that Lucifer's fall began when pride took hold of him. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. What was once a gift became the source of his destruction. The beauty that all admired turned into his ruin, and the wisdom that inspired others became the weapon of his self-destruction. Lucifer, filled with pride, sought to ascend above his station. He desired to raise his throne above God's stars, and in his heart, he said, "I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God." The heavens shook. Rebellion erupted. Peace shattered like fragile glass. Jesus himself testified, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." In an instant, Lucifer was cast into the abyss, banished from the light that had been his home. His glory faded, and his splendor was buried in darkness. The morning star was cut down, and the bright celestial body was extinguished. The celestial rebellion. But how could this happen? Why did the perfect creation fall so far? Despite Lucifer's immense influence, he is seldom mentioned in sacred texts. Why does such a world-changing being appear so little in the scriptures? Before delving into Lucifer's great celestial rebellion, we must understand what led to this tragic turn of events. The corruption of Lucifer's soul. Lucifer's character remains an enigma in Scripture. His story is not laid out in full, but instead, it is scattered across various passages, written in symbolic language. The Bible mentions him only in fragments, which makes understanding his true nature even more difficult. While we rely on the Bible for insight, this video also draws from other sources, primarily the History of the Angelic World by Father José Antonio Fortea, and writings by St. Augustine, who noted that Lucifer's desire to rise above his creator led to his fall. Augustine teaches that Lucifer, blinded by his own light, sought equality with God and was cast out, leaving behind an eternal lesson for us all. Now let's explore how Lucifer's soul began to corrupt. At first, it was just a barely perceptible spark, a fleeting thought. Lucifer began to wonder to himself, what if my light could shine brighter? What if my glory didn't always have to serve another? These were small, almost invisible questions, but like seeds, they took root in the silence of his thoughts. He began to imagine himself on high, sitting on a throne, being praised. With each duty he performed, that voice inside him grew louder, feeding his ambition. Meanwhile, heaven remained in perfect harmony. However, something in Lucifer became more distant each day. The other angels began to notice the change. He grew more introspective, more enigmatic. One day, Gabriel approached him, saying, "Lucifer, brother, what burden weighs on your heart? Your light grows restless." Lucifer looked at him but replied with a cold smile, "There are things even we cannot understand, dear Gabriel." Gabriel felt a chill, an unease, but Lucifer averted his gaze, avoiding further words that might reveal the storm growing within him. Day by day, Lucifer began to neglect his duties. His voice, once the leader of the heavenly choir, grew silent. The other angels felt his absence as if a star had vanished from the firmament. In praise gatherings, where he had once stood first, he now attended half-heartedly, gazing upward with a mix of pride and resentment. The decision to rebel. Heaven had clear rules, but no chains. God had granted each angel the freedom to love and serve in their perfection. They also possessed the gift of free will. As Lucifer wrestled with the growing darkness within him, the angels around him began to sense something strange, the tension of his choice. Some, dazzled by his greatness, began to listen to his voice with new ears, silently following him as if his light could lead them to another destiny. One of the cherubim, noticing the change in Lucifer, approached him and asked Lucifer, "Do you no longer find joy in singing?" Lucifer replied with a cold smile, "I found other pursuits. Perhaps there is something beyond what we've known." And so, the morning star made his decision. The spark within him became a flame, and that flame grew into an all-consuming fire. "I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High." That night, his radiance changed. No longer was it the light of praise, but the blaze of ambition. Paradise, so perfect and so full of peace, felt the first tremor of rebellion. Lucifer's charisma and influence. Lucifer's name, meaning light-bringer, was no empty title. He was heaven's beacon, the morning star that rose first, illuminating others in creation's night. Every angel listened to his words with devotion, for Lucifer spoke of God like no one else had. The angels were no innocent souls. They were wise, strong, each a reflection of God's purity. Yet Lucifer drew them in not with weak love, lies, or empty promises, but with his charisma and unshakable authority. He did not deceive the angels like a liar, but spoke with passion, with a vision so compelling that many followed him. They saw in him a new light, a brief, brilliant star in the sky. Lucifer gave the impression of being a unique leader, worthy of following. His goodness, his authority, his respect, and his influence were all well-deserved. But as we come to understand how this masterpiece of God truly was, we grasp why God himself praised his creation. Even in Lucifer's sin, he remained strong, and his character had not completely destroyed God's work. The divine warning came as God called Lucifer alone into the sacred silence. His voice, like a deep river, addressed Lucifer with love and patience. "Lucifer, my son, the seal of perfection, I sense your thoughts straying from me. In your heart, ideas are growing that separate you from the eternal." With a serene glow, Lucifer looked at the Creator and replied, "Father, didn't you create me to understand and explore? There is nothing I desire more than to comprehend the depth of your work. Do you think that's wrong?" God's sadness was profound, though contained. His heart was heavy, for he knew that Lucifer's desire for something beyond what had been created would lead him down a path that would change the course of heaven forever. God's infinite patience. God's heart, immense and patient, understood the fragility of the freedom he had given. He knew that the seeds of pride could germinate even in the purest soil. Lucifer's thoughts, once noble, had started to stray, and God, in his infinite mercy, continued gently. "Lucifer, your desire to understand is noble, but your thoughts are becoming self-centered. You've been seduced by the light I placed within you. You forget that this light is a reflection of my love, not your own source." Lucifer lowered his gaze, but inside him, a fire of incomprehension and pride began to burn. "My Lord, I have wanted nothing that isn't yours. My light is the gift you gave me. How could I turn away from you if I was made by your own will?" God looked at him with eyes of infinite tenderness. He knew that deep down, Lucifer was beginning to perceive the beauty of his own glory as an end in itself. Lucifer hadn't sinned yet, but his love was cooling and a new darkness was growing within him. God, full of mercy, extended his hand towards Lucifer. "Son, remember where all light comes from. Don't let your heart be shrouded in shadows. If you turn to me, your splendor will grow in truth, and together we will be even greater than any solitary thought." But Lucifer, instead of feeling peace, felt a sting in his pride. A discomfort he could barely understand, but it was there. Doesn't God trust my ability to remain faithful? He wondered, why so many warnings? He withdrew with a bow, but inside him, an invisible distance was growing. As the days passed, his desire to understand and explore continued to absorb his attention. He no longer paused to contemplate God with the same devotion. The angels still worshipped him, and his voice still led the choirs, but his heart was divided. The final rejection. Once again, God called Lucifer. "Lucifer, I have seen the path you're taking, and it pains me to see you like this. Your light is turning to shadow. There's still time, my son. If you return, the love within you will bloom anew." But this time, Lucifer refused to listen. His hardened heart sought only self-satisfaction and personal glory. In his mind, he began to justify his thoughts. "Don't I deserve more?" God, in his infinite patience, let him go. He knew he had given Lucifer all the love and mercy possible. "I will not turn away from you," God said. A final warning, but you are free to choose. God's sorrow was immense, an ancient and painful sadness. He knew he would lose his most beautiful creation. His mercy was infinite, but Lucifer's choice had to be respected. Even in his fall, God thought, "I will love him." As Lucifer drifted further away, all of heaven seemed to hold its breath. Soon, a great revelation would come to heaven, testing every celestial being, especially Lucifer. God, in his infinite wisdom, delayed that moment. He wanted to give Lucifer time to prepare, to grow in humility, to strengthen the loyalty in his heart. With love and concern, God spoke to him. "My son," he said tenderly, "a great revelation approaches, and when it comes, The wind will be strong. The tensions in your heart will be intense, like a storm tearing through the sky. You must prepare yourself, root yourself in obedience, for the test will be great. Lucifer listened sincerely. He knelt before God, gazing at him with devotion. His voice, soft yet firm, arose from the depths of his being. Father, whatever the test may be, I desire to obey your commands. I cannot promise I'll be perfectly faithful, but I swear my desire is to be loyal. My heart still burns with your love. These words were not lies. Lucifer spoke from the depths of his heart, and in his soul burned a genuine desire to remain loyal. Yet at the same time, in a dark corner of his mind, the seed of pride continued to grow. Am I not the one who shines most brightly among all the angels? He thought silently. The temptation. God, in his patience, gave Lucifer another chance. Once again, he postponed the revelation, allowing Lucifer more time, more space to draw near, to seek humility in his heart. Lucifer, this test will not be easy. Even when it seems the wind carries you away, you must remember your origin, your essence. You must remember that all light comes from me. Lucifer's temptation was like the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, an earthly paradise reflecting heaven's harmony. God had given them everything, a place of peace and love. But in the midst of the garden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil stood as a reminder of their freedom, their ability to choose. The serpent whispered to Eve, "You will be like God, knowing good and evil." And this was the same temptation Lucifer now faced. The desire for more. The mistake Lucifer made in that whisper was born of the desire to be something more, to not depend completely on God. The morning star, the son of dawn, had turned his back on the light that gave him life, choosing instead to walk toward the shadow. Free will, God's most precious gift, proved to be the most vulnerable point in Eden and heaven. Pride opened the door to his downfall, and perfect peace was shattered. The virtues that had once been the pillars of the angels became fragile, and heaven, for the first time, knew shadow. The great revelation and the ultimate test had arrived. God, in his infinite patience, had delayed the moment of testing time and again, speaking to Lucifer in the depths of his heart. "My son," God said repeatedly, "the time of revelation approaches. You must prepare yourself." It was a fatherly warning, a loving message calling for humility. God, who had loved Lucifer so deeply, still believed that Lucifer could change. He hoped that love could overcome the pride, beginning to darken Lucifer's light. But the time had come when the waiting had to end. God had to consider all celestial beings, not just Lucifer. All of heaven felt the tension in the air, a deep expectation that covered every angel. And on that day, God gathered his heavenly hosts, all his angels, great and small, in an assembly that illuminated the firmament. A solemn silence fell. All of heaven held its breath as the firmament opened, and God's presence shone with infinite majesty. The great revelation. Then, like soft thunder, his voice filled the entire cosmos. "I will create a material universe," the Creator announced, "a place where life will flourish, a place that will reflect my love and glory in a new way." Before the angels, he unveiled the vision of what would be: stars, galaxies, planets spinning in perfect order. And on one of these worlds, Earth, a place where life would flourish in its greatest splendor. The angels watched, fascinated. In their hearts, joy grew as they beheld the Creator's plans. Everything was new, like a dream they had never imagined. But then God continued, and his words became even more mysterious. "I will not only create this universe. On that world, I will create beings in my image and likeness. They will be called humans. They will be of flesh and spirit, a blend of heaven and earth. And more, in that same place, I myself will become flesh." The second person of the Trinity, my Son will take human form. His name will be Jesus Christ, and in that humanity you shall worship me." The silence in heaven became overwhelming. God, the Eternal, was asking the angels to worship him in the human form of Jesus Christ. He was asking them to bow not only to divine majesty, but to a human face, fragile and humble. The angels erupted in a mixture of awe and jubilation. Seeing how the light of light would become flesh was an act so wonderful, so sublime, that many could not contain their joy. It was God's plan in its most unexpected form, a display of the deepest, most incomprehensible love. They acclaimed the Creator, feeling privileged to witness such a mystery. Lucifer's rejection. But the mystery of the incarnation was not all. God also revealed that humanity would eventually become corrupted, and he would sacrifice himself for them through crucifixion. Yet, among the angels, one of the brightest remained motionless. Lucifer didn't move, speak, or cheer. He watched with a distant expression, as if the light surrounding him couldn't penetrate his heart. His gaze was like a dark well, and his face reflected the internal storm raging within him. Lucifer defied God in that moment. Everything crumbled inside him. The idea of bowing to a human form, of worshiping God in the humility of mortal flesh, seemed incomprehensible, unacceptable. Why, he thought. Why would perfection itself need to lower itself? Why should we, beings of light, worship a being of flesh? When he heard that God would create humans, and that they would eventually corrupt themselves, Lucifer's disdain grew. Knowing that God would sacrifice himself for them, knowing that these finite and ungrateful beings would rebel, shook him to the core. Not only would they rebel, but they would also kill him. Lucifer was stunned. Could it be any more absurd? He thought to himself. He observed God's plan with a mixture of disbelief and disdain. The mystery of the incarnation, the revelation that the Creator would take human form in Jesus Christ, unleashed an internal storm within Lucifer, and from that, the question of worth. A storm raged within Lucifer, and a burning question emerged. Why not me? For centuries, he had been the most beautiful, the closest to the throne, the Creator's masterpiece. Why hadn't he been chosen for the hypostatic union? He felt that his light, his splendor, and his wisdom made him worthy of something greater. But instead of elevating him, God had decided to lower himself to human flesh. From this thought, bitterness was born, a bitterness that coiled around his heart like a serpent, suffocating every trace of love and respect he had once held for the Father. Finally, the decisive moment arrived. God was there, surrounded by the multitude of angels, and one by one, his brothers knelt in adoration, accepting the revelation of the incarnation. But Lucifer remained standing, his body rigid, his gaze fixed on God's throne, and his heart filled with silent hatred. Slowly, he opened his lips, and in a tone devoid of emotion, he uttered a simple word, one that resonated like thunder in heaven's silence. No. God looked at him with a mixture of sadness and love, but Lucifer felt nothing but disdain. He took a deep breath and repeated the word, this time with a force that shook all present. No. His voice rose cold and defiant, like that of a king pronouncing judgment. The angels present shuddered, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. How could the purest, most beautiful angel defy the Creator himself? How dare he disobey? Lucifer then turned his gaze to the multitude of angels, and with terrifying calm, began to address them. The seduction of rebellion. Don't you realize this is a mistake? He asked. Can't you see that what God asks of us is absurd? His voice, charged with dark wisdom, filled the celestial space. He asks us to worship an inferior form, to bend our knees before mortal flesh. This isn't glory, it's humiliation. Each word, laden with intelligence and persuasion, embedded itself in the angels' hearts, sowing doubt, disturbing the peace that once filled them. God asks the unacceptable of us. Lucifer continued with icy passion. We are not the ones who must accept this nonsense. It is God who has failed, who has taken a wrong path. Why should we bow to something beneath us? We who were made of pure light should occupy a higher place, not lower ourselves. The angels listened, bewildered. His words seemed so logical, so full of reason. In some, the seed of rebellion began to germinate. Lucifer, with the charisma that had always been his gift, looked at them one by one, his face reflecting cold determination. Lucifer, first among angels, had fallen. The intervention of Archangel Michael was imminent. The angels, filled with doubt, listened to Lucifer's words. Whispers of rebellion and reason echoed in their hearts. His speech had a seductive logic, a convincing force that penetrated like gentle poison. Is God asking the impossible of us? Is it fair that we must bow before a human form, before something so low? These were thoughts that some barely dared to formulate, yet there they were, growing like shadows in their souls of light. As Lucifer spoke, his words flowed with the charisma and authority he had always possessed. It was impossible not to listen. His speech was firm, direct, and every phrase resonated with a blend of wisdom and defiance. But suddenly, in the midst of his discourse, a voice rose with a force that shook the entire heavens, a cry overflowing with conviction and simplicity. The voice of Michael, who was like God. The voice belonged to Michael, the small archangel, a being of lesser rank, but whose purity shone with incomparable strength. His exclamation pierced through the angels like a sword. In 3 words, Michael had answered all of Lucifer's arguments, pointing out the fundamental flaw in his logic. Who is like God? It was a cry of humility, a cry of absolute recognition that no one could rival the Creator, not even the morning star. The angels trembled. Michael's words, so simple and direct, awakened something within them, reminding them of who they were, where they came from, and to whom they owed their existence. Lucifer, upon hearing that cry, turned to Michael, his gaze filled with icy fury, but also surprise. No one, until then, had dared to challenge him so openly. Michael stepped toward him, small in comparison, but full of courage. "You are arrogant," Michael said. His words were as thunderous as lightning. His voice, though calm, carried a conviction that pierced like an arrow. "Your light, Lucifer, has become a shadow, trying to eclipse the Creator. Can't you see that you've placed yourself above God?" Lucifer felt a deep pain in his core, a wound that. The burning rebellion. The moment Michael had spoken those words, Lucifer's pride, his ambition, had been exposed, publicly, naked and humiliated. Rage and shame flooded him like dark waves crashing against his heart. With a look of contempt, he tried to stand firm before Michael, but something in those words burned him from within. "You understand nothing," Lucifer retorted, trying to maintain his dignity. "Are you so blind that you can't see what we're being asked is humiliation? I, who was first in his glory, cannot kneel before something so inferior." His words sounded firm, but the contained fury and bitterness distorted his voice. Michael looked at him, serene yet unyielding. His voice, though quiet, held the force of 1,000 storms. "You don't understand love, Lucifer. This isn't about humiliation, but love. God becomes flesh for us, and you reject him because you can't bear to be lesser. You've forgotten your place. You've forgotten that all you are is a reflection of his glory. It's not God who lowers himself. It's your pride that elevates you beyond your own being." Lucifer felt he couldn't bear it. It was as if Michael was showing him his own image, and what he saw wasn't beautiful, but a shadow full of resentment. He couldn't withstand the weight of that truth, of that love Michael defended so fiercely. Without a word, he turned away, distancing himself from Michael and all who watched. He retreated, his posture straight, but inside, an uncontainable anger burned. Alone, Lucifer wept, not tears of sorrow, but of pure rage, of a growing hatred born from his wounded pride. How dare Michael? How could he challenge him, the brightest of all? Yet, deep within, a faint voice reminded him that Michael was right, and this truth tormented him the most. The beginning of the rebellion. Can't you see that God asks the impossible of us? He whispered, his voice low but full of conviction. He asks us to renounce who we are, to kneel before an inferior form. Why should we, beings made of light, humble ourselves before something made of clay? Are we supposed to worship a crucified God? We glorious beings must kneel before that broken body, bloodied, covered in wounds, suffering beyond measure. More and more angels said, Lucifer is right. God cannot ask us to do something that defies logic. Doubt crept in. What if God is not God? What if he is just a very powerful angel? What if he is merely a greater Lucifer? In any case, the seed of doubt had been planted in many angelic minds. Lucifer's gaze, intense and burning, bore into his brothers, and many felt a powerful truth in his words. Lucifer didn't speak of hate, nor did he call for violence. He spoke of dignity, of the greatness of their existence, and their right to preserve it. Lucifer knew how to reach their hearts. He spoke of freedom, of independence, of becoming something beyond what they had always been. He promised them a heaven where they wouldn't have to bow to anyone, a place where their own talents and light would be recognized without the need to subordinate themselves. God has given us free will, he said. Why not exercise it? Why not be who we truly are? With each gathering, his army grew. It wasn't lesser angels who followed him, but the most beautiful, the wisest, those in whom God had invested great power and beauty. Lucifer chose them carefully, seeking out those who, like him, yearned for something more. Heaven's most radiant beings, once the crown jewels of creation, began forming the rebel army. They were creatures of such perfection that they outshone all other light. And now that light was beginning to darken with shadows. The rebel army takes shape. At one of these meetings, Lucifer stood before them with commanding presence. "We are the future," he proclaimed, his voice echoing like thunder. "We are the light that refuses to kneel. We won't let our essence be dimmed beneath the shadow of an inferior form. If God won't give us the place we deserve, we'll take it ourselves." His words burned with such fervor that every angel present felt a tremor in their being. He spoke with a certainty that made them question everything they had ever known. Under his leadership, Lucifer's army took shape. Each of his followers was like a fallen star, a beauty transformed into a weapon of rebellion. The angels who had once been the most loyal, the most respected, the most beloved, now rose as the first army in heaven's history. In their hearts burned ambition, pride, and the promise of a freedom that, deep down, was a chain. The final clash. Forged by their own vanity, the firmament that was once full of harmony and peace now trembled with the echoes of war. In a corner of heaven, Michael rose, steadfast and determined, the small archangel who had fearlessly defied Lucifer. With his sword raised high, he cried out once more, "Who is like God?" That exclamation, simple yet powerful, awakened those who still doubted. Michael, with unmatched humility and strength, stood before Lucifer's army, ready to defend the Creator's honor. He knew his forces were outmatched, that Lucifer's followers were numerous and powerful, but he never wavered. His faith was his shield, his loyalty, his weapon. Thus, in heaven, the war between light and shadow reached its climax. Lucifer, the most beautiful angel, the morning star, had transformed his light into a rebellion that would forever mark the history of creation. The first battle was fought between brothers, and with each blow, each clash, the heavens shattered, and the universe held its breath. The war between light and shadow. The battle erupted with a fury that shook the very foundations of heaven. On one side stood the rebel army, led by Lucifer, his splendor cloaked in shadows, his light twisted into darkness. Facing him were the faithful angels, led by Michael, the small archangel who had risen with iron strength and unshakable faith, overflowing with humility and courage. Heaven, once a place of peace and harmony, became a dazzling battlefield. It was a war of light against shadow, loyalty against rebellion. The armies clashed like waves of fire and thunder. Each blow, each crossing of light swords, created flashes that lit up the heavens like shooting stars in a fierce dance. The fallen angels, once the most beautiful and powerful beings to grace the sky, fought with seemingly inexhaustible fury. But the faithful angels battled with a quiet determination, guided by love and loyalty to the Creator. Michael, the lowest-ranking archangel, advanced at the forefront of his brothers, shouting with a fervor that echoed throughout the universe, "Who is like God?" Michael's strength lay not in his rank or splendor, but in his faith. He fought not for his own glory or pride, but because he knew that goodness, light, and truth were with him. In that certainty, his strength seemed to multiply. The faithful angels felt enveloped in divine power, a protection reminding them they were not alone. The Creator was with them, and that presence gave them strength surpassing any earthly force. Lucifer's wrath. Lucifer, enraged, tried to push Michael back. He rose on his wings, exhaling a shadow that enveloped those who looked upon him. "I was the first. I am the true light," he shouted. But his words were empty, hollow, a dark echo of what he once had been. The light within him was a distorted shadow, and his power, though formidable, could not eclipse the truth that Michael held like a pure flame. The battle was fierce, and the heavens themselves felt wounded. Angels who weren't fighting watched in awe and sorrow, feeling the weight of rebellion in their hearts. The peace that had been heaven's core was shattered, and the once perfect order teetered on the brink. Yet amid the destruction, hope stood firm. The faith of the loyal angels, their love for God, shined in every blow they struck and every step they took toward Lucifer and his followers. The fall of Lucifer. At last, the force of good prevailed. Michael's sword raised high uttered the battle's final words. By God's power, fall. In that moment, darkness split. The rebellion, once so fierce and violent, began to crumble. The fallen angels, a third of all heavenly hosts, were cast out, dragged like stars plummeting from the sky. Lucifer became Satan, and with him, all who had followed his ambition were hurled into the abyss. Heaven fell into a solemn silence, a hush that bore the sadness of an irreparable loss. The war had left deep scars, a wound in paradise that only love and time could heal. The faithful angels felt the battle's weight on their souls, but knew that light had triumphed. Truth, faith, and hope, those virtues which can never be defeated, had prevailed. The eternal truth. In this victory, heaven remembered an eternal truth. Good always triumphs over evil, not by force, not by violence, but because goodness is the very essence of God, a light that no darkness can extinguish. Pride, hatred, and ambition may fight fiercely, but they are fleeting shadows against the purity of love and faithfulness. The battle had ended, and heaven, though wounded, remained at peace. The expulsion and Lucifer's fate. Peace, Michael's faith, the humility of his words, who is like God, now echoed in every corner of the universe, an immovable and eternal truth. It was a reminder that God's glory is infinite, and that nothing, not even the brightest light, can surpass his love. The expulsion of Lucifer and his followers marked the final battle's end. Heaven opened to cast out the rebels. Lucifer, once the morning star, along with his fallen followers, was hurled far from the light, dragged into an abyss of darkness and desolation. In the act of expulsion, heaven itself seemed to tremble. The angels who had been the most beautiful, the most powerful, those whose light rivaled the stars, fell like banished meteors cast into the lower world, a place of chaos and shadow, a kind of eternal exile where God's glory could not be seen or felt. Lucifer, now transformed into Satan, felt the weight of the fall like a burning iron in his being. The total separation from God, from light, and from heavenly peace was a wound deeper than any physical punishment could inflict. The underworld where he was confined with his followers wasn't yet the final hell, but a state of chaos and utter spiritual isolation, a place beyond peace and glory's reach. It was like a shattered dream, a dark reflection of heavenly order, a realm utterly cut off from holiness. For Satan, this expulsion meant the end of his original purpose. Yet, in his pride and rage, his hatred morphed into a new mission. If he couldn't attain God's glory, he would destroy it wherever he found it. In this abyss of despair, his gaze turned toward creation, to the material world God had promised to make. In his twisted mind, a thought took shape. If he couldn't have heaven, he'd corrupt God's most precious work, humanity. The idea of seeing humans, made in God's image, dragged into darkness gave him bitter satisfaction. Humans were the ones who had stolen his place at God's throne. That love, that goodness with which they were created, would become the target of his hatred. His motivation was clear. If he and his fallen angels couldn't be in God's presence, then humans shouldn't deserve it either. The birth of evil. This hatred and resentment transformed into a mission, a deep desire to sabotage the divine work and corrupt the purity of creation. Lucifer's expulsion and his army of fallen angels had a direct consequence on the balance of good and evil in the world. From that moment, evil began to exist, not just as an absence of goodness, but as an active and organized force. The demons, led by Satan, began to seek ways to exert their influence over the material world, to corrupt humans, to incite pride, envy, and despair. These were the very feelings that had led to their own downfall. God, in his love and justice, had allowed this separation. The expulsion wasn't just a punishment. It was an act of divine justice. The angels who had chosen rebellion, who had rejected God's love and holiness, could no longer dwell in his presence. God's love was always there, but his justice demanded balance. Those who had decided to reject the light could not continue to bask in it. In this act, the equilibrium between God's love and justice was perfectly manifested. Justice required separation, and love still granted the fallen ones the freedom to exist, albeit in a darkness of their own choosing. The eternal conflict. The story of Lucifer, now Satan, doesn't end with his expulsion, but rather extends into the relationship between good and evil in the world today. His fall, his hatred, and his desire to corrupt humanity remain present in every temptation, in every spiritual battle that humans face. Evil seeks to infiltrate the human heart, its freedom, its desire for greatness. But this influence is limited, and good, which comes from God, always has the final say. The battle between good and evil that began in heaven continues on earth, in the hearts of human beings. Satan and his demons seek to darken the light of every soul, but God's grace, love, and justice are always present, reminding us that although evil may be loud and defiant, good will always triumph. Lucifer's fall became the beginning of an eternal conflict, a reminder that ultimately, goodness, light, and divine love are invincible. As in heaven, on earth too, Michael's question will always resonate: who is like God? Lucifer's influence in the world. Since his expulsion, Lucifer, now Satan, has pursued a single purpose: to corrupt the creation he once inhabited. The Bible recounts various episodes where Satan appears as the tempter, challenging not only mere mortals, but also key figures in the world. His influence spreads in the form of temptation, leading souls astray, always seeking to undermine God's work. The temptation of Jesus. The history of faith is rich with symbolic moments, and perhaps the most iconic is found in the New Testament when Satan attempts to tempt Jesus in the desert. After 40 days and nights of fasting, Jesus is confronted by Satan, who offers him temptations of power, food, and glory. Satan says, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." Then, he takes Jesus to the pinnacle of the temple and suggests that he throw himself down so that angels will protect him, demonstrating his power. Finally, Satan offers Jesus all the kingdoms of the world in exchange for worship, revealing his ultimate intention to usurp the worship that belongs to God alone. Jesus' response to each temptation demonstrates his spiritual strength and complete trust in the Father. Jesus firmly rejects each proposal, quoting scripture and reaffirming the truth that power and glory belong to God alone. This episode, more than just a confrontation, exemplifies how faith and humility can withstand even the most alluring temptations. Jesus shows that true power lies not in miracles or wealth, but in obedience and love for God. The testing of Job. Another tale of temptation is the testing of Job, found in the book of Job. Satan appears before God with a mix of arrogance and defiance, hurling an accusation. Does Job fear God for nothing? In that moment, Satan not only challenges Job's faithfulness, but attempts to question the very goodness of faith itself. He implies that Job's love is superficial, a loyalty bought with blessings. His challenge is an affront to the nature of love and faith, suggesting that no one, not even the most righteous, can remain faithful amid suffering. Job's story reveals Satan's capacity to try and destroy faith at its core, inflicting pain and despair. However, Job's response, though filled with anguish and doubt, is a lesson in spiritual strength. In his endurance, Job proves that faith is not merely a response to blessings, but a deep-rooted loyalty that persists even in the face of extreme suffering. Satan fails, and Job's faith becomes an eternal testament to resisting evil and trusting in God. The fall of humanity in the Garden of Eden. Moreover, Satan's first major act after being cast out occurred in the Garden of Eden, the place where God, with his infinite love, had set the stage for human history. In that perfect garden, Lucifer saw a chance to strip the innocence from the first humans, Adam and Eve, and turn them into the first victims of his rebellion against the Creator. Taking the form of a serpent, a symbol of cunning and betrayal, he approached Eve with words dripping with seduction and doubt. Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? He began with a question, planting the seed of suspicion. His technique wasn't overwhelming force, but a whisper that, like poison, invaded Eve's heart. Lucifer knew how to transform a simple desire into an irresistible need, how to turn doubt into action. You will be like God, knowing good and evil. This promise sealed humanity's fate. Adam and Eve, tempted by the possibility of being more, of achieving divinity without obeying their Creator, fell. And with them, the world fell into the shadow of sin. Lucifer, with a single temptation, achieved what he had planned from the abyss, to separate creation from its Creator, to bring the celestial conflict into the human heart. Lucifer's ongoing influence. Lucifer's influence hasn't vanished. His presence remains a constant conflict in human life. Each temptation, each moment of doubt, echoes that first choice in Eden, and the challenges faced by Job and Jesus. Evil acts as an echo of that primordial rebellion, a voice trying to separate us from the source of goodness. However, in every biblical episode, in every story of resistance, we're reminded that good has the final word. Faith and love are the answers to hatred and despair. Lucifer's role in Revelation. In the Bible's final book, Revelation, Satan's ultimate fate and role in the end times are unveiled. This tale, brimming with striking imagery and prophecies, portrays Satan as the great dragon, humanity's and God's ultimate foe, determined to corrupt creation until the very end. John, the author of Revelation, describes a vision of the last days, an era when evil seems to have reached its zenith, and the battle between light and darkness intensifies like never before. Revelation presents Satan as the great dragon, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. The same Lucifer who was once the morning star has now taken the form of a fierce dragon. The ultimate defeat of Satan. In Revelation, Satan is portrayed as a creature symbolizing not only evil but also the destructive and deceptive power he has wielded since his fall. This ancient serpent is the same one who brought the first sin to humanity in Eden, and now, at the end of time, he seeks to destroy all remaining goodness and light in the world. Revelation describes a time of tribulation, a period of catastrophes and trials, where humanity is divided between those who follow God and those who succumb to evil seductions. In this account, Satan appears in his role as the great deceiver, the being who, from the beginning, has sought to separate humanity from God. In the last days, he intensifies his efforts, using every means at his disposal to carry out his mission of corruption and destruction. He is described as the accuser of our brothers and sisters, constantly trying to lead the faithful astray, sowing doubt, temptation, and despair. John's vision shows Satan facing off against Michael and the heavenly armies one last time. This epic battle is a continuation of the war that began in heaven when Lucifer was cast out. Now, in this culmination of time, the conflict reaches its fiercest point. Revelation also portrays Satan as the mastermind behind the beast and the false prophet, sinister forces that rise on earth to spread chaos and idolatry. Through them, Satan seeks to establish a kingdom that directly challenges God's authority. This counterfeit realm is a twisted imitation of the divine kingdom. Satan's attempt to be worshipped as a god culminates in the utter corruption of creation. Here, his ultimate ambition is revealed, to usurp the glory he's always craved, even if through deception and tyranny. The final triumph of good. Revelation concludes with a vision of good's final triumph over evil. After the Great Tribulation and the last battle, Satan is defeated, and evil's power is dismantled forever. In a symbolism-laden image, Satan is captured and hurled into the lake of burning sulfur. This place of eternal punishment renders him powerless to reach humanity or influence creation. This act of ultimate justice seals Satan's inevitable fate and that of his followers, an eternity completely separated from God. God's glory, Satan's fall in Revelation, is the ultimate expression of good's victory over evil. God, in his love and justice, allows evil to act only to a point, giving humanity the freedom to choose. But at the end of times, when all has been tested and decisions have been made, evil is finally vanquished. This final destiny isn't just a consequence of Satan's actions, but a reaffirmation of God's power over all creation. In his ultimate downfall, Satan becomes the symbol of a failed rebellion, a dimmed light that, in its ambition and hatred, could never overcome the love and goodness that give life to all. The eternal promise. The defeat of Satan in Revelation holds profound meaning for humanity's history and destiny. This prophecy reminds us that although evil may seem formidable, its time is limited, and its power pales in comparison to God's eternal nature. Good triumphs not only through strength, but because it embodies the very essence of truth, justice, and love. This final battle between good and evil symbolizes the divine promise of restoration and redemption for those who choose light over darkness. In the present day, the Revelation account serves as a reminder that while Satan continues to attempt to lead humanity astray, his fate is sealed, his power is limited, and his rebellion will ultimately fail. The story of his fall and defeat in the end times reinforces the hope that good, no matter how challenged, will always prevail. Faith, hope, and perseverance are the spiritual weapons that draw us closer to God and remind us that the final victory belongs to good and that God's light will shine forever. If you've been intrigued by Lucifer's story and his fall, you won't want to miss the fascinating account of the 5 prophecies in the book of Revelation. These prophecies reveal Lucifer's final fate and his role in the events that will end the conflict between good and evil. These prophecies explain Satan's last great act to corrupt the world. You'll see how Lucifer's rebellion not only affected his destiny, but is deeply intertwined with humanity's future and the ultimate triumph of divine justice. Get ready to uncover the conclusion of a tale that began with a fall and ends in ultimate revelation. Click the video on the screen to watch. You won't want to miss this.